When I saw that Andrew, what he picked for the opening hymn, I admit I became a little bit curious. They'll know we are Christians by our love. How many of you have heard that hymn or sung it before? Raise your hands. How many of you have heard it or sung it before? It doesn't really have that kind of classic measured formality that we tend to hear a lot in places and spaces like these. In fact, when I hear it, it feels more like something that was written so it could be sung around a campfire. And it has a very 60s and 70s kind of vibe to it, kind of folky, if you will. And so I was curious. I did a little research because I am a church nerd. And sure enough, I came upon a piece written by somebody named Joshua Taylor, who wrote this for the United Methodists. And the piece is entitled, "History of Hymns. They Will Know We Are Christians by Our Love." And this is what he wrote. Peter Schultz was a Catholic priest serving at St. Brendan's Parish on the south side of Chicago in 1966. And he penned "They'll Know We Are Christians by Our Love" when he could not find a suitable song to accompany a series of ecumenical and interracial events for which the youth choir that he led was going to sing. And so, like many songs coming out of the popular folk music of the 1960s, "They'll Know We Are Christians by Our Love" connected to the societal upheaval of the decade alongside popular protest songs like Bob Dylan's "Blowing in the Wind" or Pete Seeger's "Where Have All the Flowers Gone?" Schultz's text connected the faith story of young people disillusioned with the landscape of American culture. Blowing in the wind, where have all the flowers gone? And they'll know we are Christians by our love. And so it is that for one time, and one time alone in my life, I was right. You take those wins whenever and however you can, even if it's related to obscure trivia of hymnody. But I must confess that this song that we opened with is not one of my faves. And I do appreciate why it was written. I respect the fact that a priest wanted to use his talents as a means by which to signal protest during a volatile time. Well done on all fronts to Father Schultz. It's just when it comes to this hymn, I'm not sure I always really believe it. I mean, will they know we are Christians by our love? And for one thing, I question the central assumption of this song is if only Christians have the market cornered on love. Do other religions not love? Do Muslims or Buddhists or people of the Jewish faith not love? And for that matter, are agnostics and atheists completely incapable of love? I certainly do not buy the truth of all that. But it brings me to the second point. Is the song even true? Are Christians actually known in correlation with how much and how well we love? Or is it possible that there are those professing to be Christian who are known by, shall we say, less flattering characteristics? And please understand that I say this as an indictment of my own actions and inactions as much as anyone else's. I will be the first to admit that my own behavior as a professing Christian is not exactly loving all of the time. I do not work with each other side by side very well. I do not guard human dignity and save human pride all the time very well, and I think that's probably true for all of us, that this hymn just may not apply. Now, I say all that knowing there's probably someone here or at home listening who absolutely loves this hymn. Maybe this person processed down the aisle at their wedding while this hymn was being played in the background. Or maybe more poignantly, they sung it at a loved one's funeral. If that's the case, I apologize. I'm not trying to rid the church of this hymn's existence. It's not without its merits. There are times and instances where the church has been known for its love. The civil rights movement, as a for instance, 100%. Absolutely. During the movement of the 1960s, during which time this hymn was written. And related to that, excuse me, I want to share something that I've discovered in recent years. There's a good chance that we know of someone, and we know of at least one person who at some point in their life was engaged and involved in the church, and then for whatever reason stopped. Could be any number of reasons. Sometimes it's because a person experienced a crisis of faith and they questioned the whole enterprise. Sometimes it's because that person even stopped believing in God or in organized religion. Or sometimes it's because that person grew up in a congregation that frowned upon them or someone else for their life, for their choices, for any number of reasons. Maybe it was because of their sexuality. Maybe it was because they are divorced. Maybe it's because they drank in high school. Or maybe it was because they became pregnant at an age or stage not deemed appropriate. And whatever it was that happened, they were shown nothing in the way of grace, acceptance, much less love. And it led these people to the conclusion that if this is how my church responds to this situation, then it must be that all churches would respond in exactly the same way. And whatever it was that the church condemned them for, they then thought, well, there is no room for me in the inn, in any place like the church. And I call this a particular phrase. I call it when a person does not know the church by their love. I call that church trauma. And church trauma is one of the worst kinds of trauma that there is. I am convinced of it. Those scars, those wounds run and cut deep. And it has been inflicted upon many a person. In fact, you probably know somebody on God's green earth who themselves have the scars of church trauma and thereby believe that the body of Christ has nothing to offer them. And it's not that these people, they don't necessarily believe in a higher power. In fact, many of them do believe in God and do love Jesus. They just don't care for the church. Because the church they have known or experienced isn't known by its love. It doesn't live up to that hymn. Quite the opposite, in fact. But then sometimes something happens. Sometimes they give the church a second chance. Because sometimes they see a church that is acting right. Sometimes they see a church feeding people. Sometimes they see a church empowering and equipping people and loving people. They see a church doing justice and loving kindness and walking humbly with God. And I call these churches Micah churches. And I have found often that the walking wounded land in a Micah church. And for them, these churches are a wonderful surprise. Because these are the churches that actually do look like and act like Jesus. These are churches who are known by their love. I remember one particular person who had a challenging experience, I will say, in a previous congregation. In fact, I actually have heard a version of the story more than once, let me say. That they weren't so sure about church. They weren't so sure they could ever give it another chance. And then this person walked in to these pews. And they heard a place where all may know God's love. And they saw it. And they experienced it. And I know one person I'm thinking of in particular, I won't say their name, very involved now, who started weeping in their pew because of what they experienced here. And they experienced here a Micah church. A truly Christian church in the best sense of the word. Now, am I saying we are perfect? No. But are we faithful? I've spoken to somebody who believed for the first time that they landed in a church that actually would love them for who they are. There are probably many of you who are sitting in these pews, who the reason you are sitting in these pews is because of what you have seen and experienced here. Now, please understand that I am not trying to give off infomercial vibes for First Presbyterian Church of LaGrange, Georgia. We don't get it right all of the time. I know I certainly do not get it right all of the time. But what I am saying is that the churches who are doing it right are acting right. That the churches who are doing it right are giving people hope that perhaps the church can be loving as opposed to whatever it is they may have experienced elsewhere. And these churches are churches that follow Micah's three basic principles: doing justice, loving kindness, and walking humbly, which for Jesus was really a summation of the law, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. If we do these three very basic principles, if we follow Jesus in exactly that way, then it is possible that the walking wounded will find a place where they themselves can stay and worship and be. But we got to remember to act right. Follow these rules, and it may just be that the hymn is true, that they will know we are.